to Tom's Guitar Show. They call me Guitar Tom because I'm often seen with a guitar. And they call me on the phone. They say, "Hey man, what's your show about anyway?" I say, "Well, it's about an hour about guitar players, guitar playing, all things guitaristic." Um, so, I mean, if you want to call me on the phone, ask me a question about the care and feeding of your guitar, what kind of guitar is right for you. We'll talk about related topic like the sitar, the guitarra, uh, banjos, balalaikas, bouzouki, chicholes, bajos, sextos, tiples, cavaquinhos, ukuleles, banjolales, banjolins. If you want to talk about, ouds, lutes, vihuelas. Did I say that already? I don't know. Bob's not here. Keep me straight. Anyway, or we'll talk about flutes or clarinets, clavinets, clavichords, clavinovas, or anything like that, like trombones, trombomarinas, tubas, euphoniums, drum horns, chordholts, sackbuts, harmoniums or harmonicas, harpsichords, pipe organs, piccolos, bongos, things like that. Sure.
I have something, speaking of instruments. Oh, did we do B flat, A, and C clarinets?
Not yet, but we just did, I guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
I guess we did. I just wanted to get your input about this. I was watching that Antiques Roadshow thing on PBS, which I don't normally watch. I just happen to be channel surfing. And some gentleman had what was identified by the expert. They've got the experts to praise and evaluate antiques that people bring in. And this turned out to be a Gibson, and I think that the style was described as Florentine, gold-plated tenor banjo.
Wow. Okay.
And it was built in the 1920s. I believe 1928 was the date. It was evaluated at between $8,000 and $10,000.
It's a steal for a thing like that, yeah.
And it was beautiful. They turned over the back, and it was all I don't know what you call, but it was raised like three-dimensional design, and it was gold plated in all aspects of the banjo. But what I thought was really interesting, and I'm wondering if you had ever heard about this before, there was a little cord that came out of the sound box, and the expert explained that there was a light inside the sound box. I immediately thought, well, for showmanship, but he said it was to create heat to tighten the head of the banjo, of the soundboard. And I'd never heard of that concept before. I was wondering if you'd ever heard of anything like that, or
The only thing I know about that, well, one thing, okay, you can easily tighten the head of a banjo by taking a stick or a little rod and turning the screws around. I think there's a name for those screws. They have a name for that. And I know it, but I can't seem to access the information. And I've done this a number of times. It's like tightening any kind of snare drum, the drum key. And so I do know that other instruments that don't have that, there are things where you, like tuned bongo drums, you would get them wet, a little bit, damp them with a sponge, and then you take a hairdryer and tighten them up that way. There are certain drums where you do that. You tighten up a drum head by wetting it and then heating it up. So, but I've never heard of that in a banjo before.
Okay, so it's plausible.
I suppose it's plausible. I've never heard of that. Doesn't seem necessary. I have an old tenor banjo, but mine's probably from the 40s. And I'll say that the 20s, like from 1900 to 1920, is kind of the heyday of the tenor banjo. And by the late 20s, they quickly went out of fashion, and guitar became ubiquitous. And a lot of the tenor banjo players switched over to tenor guitars, which are 4-string guitars that are tuned like a tenor banjo, which is tuned like a viola. So it's in fifths, and it's as in it's a fifth below the mandolin, and single string you play with a pick. I spent some time on tenor banjo trying to figure it out and stuff. And I could play it okay for a little while, but as soon as my attention wanders, so I'm playing banjo. I start playing 5-string banjo chords, which are completely different, and it sounds terrible. But yeah, it's I've never heard of that before. But I guess you can tighten the head of something by heating it or something. As a bit of a side, I went recorded with Wayne Nugel a couple weeks ago. I did the Songs of the Civil War with Wayne and his baritone
for the anniversary of the Gettysburg Address, right?
Right.
Okay.
And but the recording didn't turn out quite right. There are a lot of issues, including well, loud children and people singing along and room noises and things like that. So we went back, recorded it at St. Bridget's Church, which is north of town. It's an old Catholic church. It's identical to St. Wenceslas, except Wenceslas had expanded. They had, built additions going out, but the actual chapel is identical, the same blueprint. So it's really nice acoustics. We went out there. The only problem was it was kind of cold last Friday night, or Friday in the afternoon, and so the engineer, who was actually my brother, who was on the show last week, but he was the engineering it. He turned on the heat, forced air, and he got it way up into the 40s. But he had to turn it off, because it was noisy.
Noisy, yeah.
Forced air, and so we we spent 2 hours, a little over 2 hours recording, and it got colder and colder. So I could tune the banjo, but the head kept changing because it was getting cold, and it kept, and as it gets cold, it contracts and presses the bridge up. But the other thing that happens is the strings would be in tune while they were cold. But as soon as I started playing on them, they warmed up a little bit with my touch. And so Pete was talking about how the organs, the organ tuners, they don't touch they use tools. They can't touch the pipes because it changes them. And I was saying that
the heat from their hands?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I said that if I could figure out how to play the banjo without touching the strings, I could do it. But anyway. So
interesting. Yeah, if people only knew the subtleties and the details that musicians are constantly dealing with too.
I had a lot of tuning issues. I played mostly banjo and a fair amount of guitar on that recording. We did 14 songs in a little over 2 hours.
Wow.
So it was like,
and you got the job done despite the fact that it wasn't the most comfortable circumstances to be working in.
It was cold. I mean, it was in the 40s when you turned the heat off, and then it steadily declined. So. But if you think about it, the old days, in Europe.
Well, Franz Gruber and his guitar, Silent Night, and the cold winter night, I guess, he may have had the same issue. And because those big old churches tend to be cold.
Yeah.
So.
I went to a concert once in Poitiers when I was a kid. We lived in France, and there's a cathedral. There's a big church, big stone church. And it was the Menestriers, the minstrels, and they were dressed up in period costumes, and they were playing stuff, and then they sang some songs, but they played lutes and various flutes and things, and fiddles. They were like, historical type of thing in this old church, and you could see their breath, and I could see my own breath too. I was bundled up. But it's the thing is, I could be warm, but my fingers, and then you send the command to your brain to do this, because I do like this kind of frailing banjo stuff, and you can like send the command to your finger, but it doesn't respond.
It may or may not get there.
It's a chemical thing, So.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenges. I bring this up a little. I'm a little ashamed of it, but on the other hand, so many years later, it's just laughable all around. But when I was like a teenager in high school, and I really exploring classical music, and I would stay up late at night listening to classical music, and we had a forced air furnace in our house, and I began to get so caught up in it that the sound of the furnace coming on would disturb my music listening. And of course, I've always been a night owl, or I started to be a night owl back then. And my father was always an early to bed kind of a guy. And I can remember on more than one occasion, I would slip out and turn the thermostat way down so the furnace wouldn't kick on while I was listening to music.
And you forget
and
about
sure
it.
enough, and I would forget about it. I'd be just fine. But sooner or later, within about 2 or 3 hours, when the cold was cold enough to wake my father up, he'd come darting out of his room and muttering a lot of things we can't repeat on television, and so a little tension. That's an example of my familial tension when I was a teenager, my adolescent rebellion.
Well, at least you didn't ride a motorcycle up the steps of your high school and wear the leather jacket and get arrested frequently.
Exactly. So
I guess I think that was probably before the golden age of headphones.
Yeah. Well, I had them, but I had to create. For a while I went through this phase where I was trying to recreate a concert hall ambience, and I was just using my ear and my taste to guide me. It was crazy, but I had really good earphones actually back then. But I was just insisting on listening through the speakers. Like I say, for a while I was obsessed with concert hall ambience.
Yeah.
whatever. It froze my poor father.
Yeah. Yeah, well. Yeah, I remember those days. I used to listen to music in the headphones, and I had an 8-track and reel-to-reel tape recorder. So it had both. You know, you could actually record 8 tracks onto reel-to-reel and vice versa, which was kind of useful. You could actually hook up the record player, so I could make 8-track tapes of my favorite classical guitar records and play them in my car. But one time I think I plugged the headphones into the microphone jack, or so the wrong hole, and I ended up at night I said, "It doesn't sound very good. It's kind of muted," and so I was turned up a little louder, and then the neighbors called because from across.
Oh, because you were unaware of the. Okay.
That it was actually coming out the speakers, So anyway.
Well, like I say, sure, we neither of us were riding motorcycles up the high school step, reeking of pot smoke or anything like that.
That's true. I did ride a motorcycle though. I wasn't too obnoxious with it, I don't think, but
you never rode it up the steps of the high school, though.
Well, at least not on the inside.
Okay.
Anyway. Actually, I had what they call a sissy bar, like a luggage rack bar in the back of a motorcycle. It was a very light motorcycle, it wasn't a scary one. And I used to strap my classical guitar to that. Ride to school and ride to rehearsals and guitar lessons. See, it's kind of interesting. It has using a Fender Champion 40, and it has amp modeling. So right now I have it on this is a regular amp, not the modeling amp, just where the amp sounds like a little reverb on it. But if I push this button, I get to go on to amp modeling. So this here, this is Tweed. This is the old Fender Tweed amp. Which sounds different from this. I kind of like that, but I was fooling around with it. If I go up here a little farther, I get the another Fender Tweed. And that's actually kind of nice, I guess. If I go over here a little bit more, I get the end of the Fender Tweed. Okay. And now I'm in blackface. Blackface was a later Fender. They had the black speaker cloth on the front of it, on the front of the amp. I kind of like this one a lot. So I get another incarnation of the Fender Blackface. And yet another one. I think there are 3 different settings per. Yeah. This one is British. British, of course, for the Marshall amps and the Vox amps. Those are. Yeah, here we go. We have Fender and Gibson here, man. I'm not sure if that's the end of the British or the beginning of the metal. This is metal. Stuff like that. But I prefer the first. That's the first of the blackface. Anyway, amp modeling is a very common thing these days. People model. It's all fake now. So anyway, Thanksgiving's over, and I know the Christmas season officially starts at well, it was Thanksgiving, but now it's I think it's like Halloween, or is it Labor Day, 4th of July? When does the Christmas season start now? Is it September?
Well, it's actually not just Christmas season. It's Hallowthanksmas,
Thanksmas, okay.
which is basically as soon as they get the back to school stuff out of the way, which is by the beginning of August. Then you start bringing out the Halloween stuff, and it's just one continuous flow of consumer spending until after the New Year, I guess.
But then, because they have the New Year, of course, there's that. You get the party hats and the noisemakers and stuff like that. And of course, lots of
Well,
booze.
That's already getting usurped by Valentine's Day.
I was going to say, Valentine's Day was the next one,
Yeah.
And then there's a hop, skip, and jump to the 4th of July, I suppose. We start that. I think there's a little bit of a dead area. Isn't there, like,
No.
or
there's no
Easter.
more. As far as consumer encouraging people to consume, there's no more dead area.
St. Patty's Day? You have to get a little red derby
Green.
hat and shamrocks made out of plastic.
Yeah, on and on and on.
And more
That's
alcohol, of course. But
Absolutely.
also,
No, there's no relief from the attempts to trick people into spending money. So
I see, okay. That makes me want to play O Tannenbaum. Speaking of your youth, when I was a kid, I thought O Tannenbaum, they were talking about the atomic bomb a lot, and I didn't know English that well when I was very small. So,
'cause you lived in France, right?
well, I lived in France a couple times, but mostly I lived in Iowa. So, I mean, I'm kind of like an Iowan, sort of. I moved to Iowa as an infant, and I've left, but
But you said you didn't speak English very well. Is that because you were in Iowa, or?
maybe that was it. No, I think it was because I was under the age of 3.
Oh, so we're talking about kid. Okay.
My youth. Oh yeah, no, I've had a pretty good command of the English language. I think I grew up with pretty good grammar. I can talk good if I has to.
Very well. Yeah,
And,
very articulate.
Well, I like to think I can speak the language, but I owe it to my educated parents, I suppose. But, and also, I was just telling somebody about this earlier. That Iowa is one of the smarter states. It's not the smartest, but it's like not as smart as Minnesota, but kind of neck and neck with Wisconsin. And so we're kind of depends on the not as smart as Massachusetts, perhaps, but not far. Maybe a little smarter than New Hampshire, but aren't we all? No, I wasn't going to say that, but anyway.
Yeah, no, Iowa's always had a good public school system, and there's always been a prudent respect for education here.
Yeah.
I think that helps boost things.
Yeah. So that's been this family industry anyway. My father was a professor. My mother taught everywhere from college to elementary school, and which means she taught high school also, I guess. So, but undergraduates in college, high school, and then elementary school for many years.
So when you were about 3 years old, then you thought O Tannenbaum was atomic bomb?
Yeah, I heard about the atomic bomb quite a bit. They were talking about it quite a bit, back in those days. And now it's the H bomb, but people don't talk about it that much anymore. But yeah, the atomic bomb. Oh, atomic bomb. I don't know. And of course, there was Hark the Herald Angels. Angels named Harold. I don't know. There was a guy up the street from me named Harry Wolf, and it said Harry Wolf on his mailbox. I don't know if he had a sense of, I don't know if he had a sense of humor or if he didn't notice. I'm sure somebody must have pointed it out to him at some point along the line. But I mean, if your last name were Wolf, you probably wouldn't name your kid Harold,
Right,
unless
yeah.
you had a sense of humor, and a rather cruel one at that.
A rather cruel one at that, yeah.
Of course, there are a bit worse names, but this is a family show, so. But anyway,
So we are getting into the season, though, where O Tannenbaum is getting to be appropriate, I guess.
yeah. So I'm playing at this church called Journey Church in Coralville, up there by the Medical Classification Center, Oakdale Boulevard, or
Okay.
a little sort of strip mall area there. And and then the guy, the padre, said it was Advent. So
I think that kicks in this month. Yeah, the first 4 Sundays before Christmas.
yeah, so I think Sunday was Advent, or the first Advent or whatever. So I have to, I've been brushing off a few Christmas carols. I got the Tuscan Moon over the weekend. because I try not to play any Christmas music until after Thanksgiving. So Friday and Saturday, and down there in Kelowna at the Tuscan Moon, where you can hear me play on Fridays and Saturdays, I played
Beautiful downtown Kelowna.
That's right next to the bakery. Stop and smell the horses. But hey, you'll see Amish people zipping around the corner and going down the alley in a buggy, like in a big hurry. And also, be leaving there at like 11 o'clock at night, and there'll be people out there in their buggies at 11 o'clock at night, riding down the highway. Anyway, but I've started my Christmas music season again.
Did you, some of your family are of German ancestry, and I always associate these with Germany, but the Advent calendar, where you open the little door and a nice piece of chocolate there, I remember, I guess I associate it with Germany because we used to do that when we lived in Germany when I was a kid, and I always thought that was, so I think I might see if I can track down one. I know you can get them around here somewhere, but lately I've been appreciating ways that we can be aware of what day we're in, because I've noticed that, time zips by so quickly and we're inundated with all this 24-hour news cycle and stuff. So many days slip by and I don't even know what date it is, It's like what, and I think, as long as we're blessed with the gift of life, we should enjoy each day as it comes our way. And an Advent calendar is a nice little ritual that
Counting. It's a countdown. We did it. We had the little thing. We didn't have any chocolate behind it, but the little thing you slide over. We had various candle-like things, around Christmas time, and these were from Europe mostly, I suppose. And my family, I have German ancestry, but they came over a really long time ago, and started mixing with other races. And so, we're talking, Civil War or before.
Okay.
So, I'm German-Irish, and those mixed marriages happened in the 19th century, as far as I know. I do think I got to check this into, but I think on my grandfather's side, I think they're the Canadians. I think they were Irish, and they had closed immigration for Irish. They didn't want any more Irish, so they went to Canada, and they waited a generation, and then moved to upstate New York. So I thought that everybody in my family had been here by the Civil War.
Okay.
But I think some of them came. They were in North America by the Civil War, but they weren't actually in the U.S. But I tend to think that if you're like, if you're in Windsor, Ontario, you're like pretty darn close to.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I should look into that myself because on my mother's side of the family, I've got a mix of Irish, Welsh, and French Canadian, and they were all from up in northern Maine, a town called Holton, which is not that far from the Canadian border. And my relatives up that way were on both sides of the border. I had French Canadians who were loggers up that way, and my great-grandmother, she was a Davenport, so I think that's Scotch or Welsh or something, and she used to work as a cook in a loggers camp, and that's how she met her first husband, who was French-Canadian. But they're spilled along the border, but I have Irish, some of that is Irish ancestry, so I'm wondering if they were in the same circumstances where they were denied, because I know they date back to at least the turn of the century, and obviously even before that, because they were already there by 1900. So I'm wondering if they were under the same circumstances where they had originally tried to come in through Ellis Island, but were denied access and then ended up in Canada for a while before creeping across the border into Maine. And so it's interesting.
It's not that it's hard to immigrate in those days as a Canadian as it would be if you were Irish. So you have to wait a generation or so. But there's a lot of that porous border stuff up there, though. Like I was thinking about Lenny Breau, and if anybody's like into jazz guitar, and I'm kind of into jazz guitar, I guess I try to keep it to myself, but I like. Lenny Breau was a great fingerstyle jazz guitar player, very innovative and really smart. But he was a kind of Maine and Quebec. He was sort of like in between the two. And then Breau was a Breau, but I think but an X on the end of it at one time. Breau, but and he. So he was sort of, I think he was born in the U.S., but he spent a lot of his youth in Canada, and he was touring. His parents had a country band, Canadian country band, but they do country music up there too, quite a bit, big tradition of it. So he's on the road with his family, playing in the band when he was young, and then he came here. We were back to the United States, but he was sort of in between, and who's to say, if there are people who speak French in various parts of Maine, but kind of a patois that you wouldn't really recognize that well if you were French. And dialects and so forth, and sort of I don't know. I'm not really big on borders anyway, come to think of it. And, or,
Well, I do remember, it's been a long time since I was up there, because that side of my family, most of those people are passed on now. But I remember being taken over to Canada to meet some of my French-Canadian relatives, and it was just back and forth. Now, of course, I think you do need a show it. I think you need a passport now. I think since 9/11, that's been
maybe, I think you
tightened
do,
up.
yeah.
So, but you can still drive over, drive across the border with your American license plate or your United States driver's license and not have too big of an issue as long as you have your passport. But yeah, it just seemed like it was very. As a matter of fact, in Maine, one of the bigger towns near Holton was Presque Isle, which is clearly a French name. So there's kind of a lot of back and forth up there. So.
Yeah, well, it's a kind of regional thing,
Well, same with down when I spent some time in the Rio Grande Valley, places like McAllen, Texas. And it's interesting what people forget. They always think that it's a one-way street. They just think it's all Mexicans trying to get over here to take our jobs or, whatever. But when you're down there, you realize how interdependent the economy is because there was a big shopping mall in McAllen, in the United States. And if you browsed around in the parking lot, you would notice that maybe 60% of the license plates were Mexican. So these are Mexicans who were coming across the border not to see what they could get here, but they were spending their money here. And, that helps the McAllen. I mean, the McAllen economy is based on Mexican shoppers coming over and spending their money and buying goods here.
For border towns, I know what else is going on down there except the fact that they're on the border. If they have anything else natural resources or, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Just like in East Dubuque, they had these bars that only existed because people from Dubuque, when they had last call at 2 o'clock in the morning, they wanted to go back across the bridge and drink more over there. So they would have this bar rush at 2:05 or something like that, and everybody driving over there, drinking even more so they could make it across the bridge. And
well, I can remember I had my first drink at a bar, or actually it was the bar of an art museum. When I was 18 in New York City, because New Jersey's law was 21, and for a long time New York was 18. I think they've changed it. It's 21 in New York too. And not that I was interested in drinking beer at a bar, but it's like, one of those things, if you can do it, you're going to do it just to say you did it, So that was my very first drink in New York City, although I was a New Jersey resident. So those back and forth economies are interesting.
Sure. Yeah, that's what you need to do is to have a lower drinking age in your state, and then the border towns can really, those bars can really mop up, so to speak.
Thrive, yes.
Anyway. Well, it's been fun. I think I'm going to I think I'm going to switch guitars, so I brought this other one along with me. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. This here is a, oh wow, look at that. It's reflecting the, I think, huh? Anyway, this is a Fender Blacktop. It's actually a Mexican, speaking of borders, this is a Mexican Fender. Comes down from down the coast in Baja. This here is a DBZ. I think it's a Royale. I don't know, it's a, anyway. And this company DBZ seems to be going through a lot of different things. I'm not sure. I think Dean Zielinski, who of whom the company's named after, of course. He's the founder of Dean Guitars. Then the DBZ is Dean B. Zielinski. I don't know what his middle name is. Bernard, who knows? But he has a lot of very, sorry, it's not polite to talk with your mouth full of tuning fork. Apparently his very exacting specifications. He builds good guitars, but he, I think his investors got tired of it, and he, now he has another company. Gene Zielinski Select or something. I've also learned that Phil, who's on our who's been working on the show for many years, had a fall, and I think he injured himself, and he had to have some surgery. And I we received a call from him. He's lucid and everything, but he won't be here for quite some time. So Phil is in the hospital right now, and I thought about trying to call him. I don't know if we should try to call him right in the last few minutes of the show, or if maybe I should talk to him this week, and maybe he can call in next week. Next week is going to be a bit of a holiday show in that we're going to, in 2 weeks, on the 17th of June, we're going to have our holiday extravaganza at Uptown Bill's Coffee House. There'll be a bunch of other musicians going to play Christmas music and other music too. There'll be Jewish people playing Jewish music, and there'll be people who come from a different tradition, like Hindus and so forth, playing music. So we're going to have a big musical extravaganza 2 weeks from now at Uptown Bill's Coffee House on Tuesday the 17th of December. But next week we're going to have kind of the overload. A couple of people said they're going to come on the show.
So we might have musical guests then on the show next week?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's, insofar as, it might take a while to get through to Phil, and I'll work on that between now and next week, so we set something up so we'll know that we'll be able to get through to him, and we'll get him on the. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We could call. Maybe we can get him to call us, or we can call him, or something, or maybe we can. Maybe one of us could, or maybe all of us could go visit him at different times and take him a card or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think Phil would like a card, or do you think he's the kind of guy? Or
oh, I think he would. He'd be modest about it, but I think he would appreciate that. Yeah. And maybe I'll go check. Because I work in the hospital. I will.
I think he's at Mercy though.
Oh, he's at Mercy.
I think so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be reasonable. Because I was going to say I could visit him first thing in the morning before I left work, but if he's over at Mercy. But yeah, we'll work on that between now and next week and see what we can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he'd enjoy a card, and so.
There's a lot of stuff going on now. Jamal passed. Brett Gordon, who was an interesting character around here for a number of years, he died last week, and about a week ago. And I think it was by 9 o'clock last Tuesday night, and he had a stroke, and he had a mild stroke, a heavier stroke, and then I have heard that he died at the hospital a week ago, and so.
Yeah, we get out of touch with the realities of life, and was it Alan Watts, the philosopher and Asian religion kind of Zen person, said that basically you're born and then you're on a free fall.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's kind of connected to what I was saying earlier about appreciating each day that we have, because man, it can turn on a dime. I had several deaths among people that I knew, like relatives of people I knew back in October and November, and we take, we're again with the consumer society that we live in 24-hour news coverage, we get, it's one extreme to another. The consumer stuff, the commercials, and basically death doesn't exist. You just buy this product and your life is going to be magical. And then you get you get overly saturated with news from around the world, which is relentlessly, bad, and people dying in the thousands and stuff. So we get immune to it that way. But we forget, that life is fragile, and each day is a wonderful thing to be appreciative.
People die a lot.
Yep. Can turn on a dime.
I saw an animation once, and it was a woman, after giving birth with her knees up, and then this baby shoots out and flies through the air, and as the baby flies through the air, it ages, and he gets older, and you see like the cap and gown and this and that, and as he gets older, and and it crashes and there's a grave.
Yeah.
Boom.
That's it. That's it for all of us. I mentioned my father earlier. I remember one thing he always would say to me was, as you are now, I once was. As I am now, you will once be.
Yeah.
And I have become the he that when he used to tell me that. So
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, I work with young people. I teach up at the college and everything like that, and young freshmen, some kids 18, maybe turning 19, and, kind of fighting with me about things he needs to learn. So you need to do this, you need to practice this. He just wants to play guitar. So you have to do this, hard work and everything. And you got your jury coming up, next week and this and that. And I was in the same position. Some guy, with a little bit of gray hair was a little bit of hair that's gray. No, I mean, will be sitting next to me telling me similar things to what I'm saying now. And that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, the way it goes.
Let's see what we can do here. What if I turn it over to reverb and delay? That doesn't sound very good. I'm trying to do something that sounds good here. A little volume, a little less gain. See what I can make out of it. Hang on. I forget. I had my own version of it, but I realized it was wrong, Blue Christmas. I better look it up. I mean, what does it matter? I mean, this week, but it's going to mean a lot in a couple weeks. All right, I'm going to fool around with this a little bit more. I got the tweed, that tweed. How about this tweed? I guess that's it for this week. I'll be back next week.